spun creation, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His careful hands, they hold us safe within His promise of calling and of destiny. We're heaven-spun creations, His pride and adoration, treasures woven by His love. His kindness so hold us safe within His promise of calling and of destiny. And I will sing of all You've done, and I'll remember how far You carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end. A father's heart that's for me, a never-ending story of love that's always chasing me. His kindness overwhelming and hope for me unending. He's never given up on me. And I will sing of all You've done, and I'll remember how far You carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end. And I will sing of all You've done, and I'll remember how far You carried me from beginning until the end. You are faithful, faithful to the end. Oh, until the end. Oh, Your faith. Oh, You're faithful until the end. Thank You, Lord. Oh, there wasn't a day that You weren't by my side. There wasn't a day that You let me fall. In all of my life, Your love has been true, and with all of my life, I will worship You. There wasn't a day that You weren't by my side. There wasn't a day that You let me fall. In all of my life, Your love has been true, and with all of my life, I will worship You. Oh yes, we will worship You. Oh, for all You've done, Thank you, Lord. We stay in your presence today, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I love you, Lord. Oh, your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. Oh, yeah, Lord. All my life you have been faithful. Thank you, Lord. All my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, we sing it again, Lord. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Yes. With every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. Your goodness is running after me. With my life laid down and surrender now, I give you everything. Your goodness is running after me. All my life you have been faithful. All my life you have been so, so good. Oh, we believe every breath that I am able. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. All my life, and all my life you have been faithful. Yes, He has. All my life you have been so, so good. Yes, with every breath that I am able, oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, I will sing of the goodness of God. Oh, Jesus, we just praise you today. You are all that matters here, Lord. We just long to be with you, Jesus. Surround us with your love today. Oh, peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still. Every wave at your name, oh, peace, bring it all to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still, call the sea to still, the rage in me to still. Every wave at your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. Call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, oh. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Jesus, oh, your light, Lord. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Good morning. It's good to be here together. Thank you, Joel. Let's give it up. His last act of internship. Thank you, Joel. There we are. Yeah. I can't boss him around anymore. I'll still try. I'm just bossy. Some of you laughed a little too hard at that. I think that was my husband. Well, good morning. My name is Rebekah. It is good to be here in the house of God this morning to read God's word, to hear God's voice, to worship together as the family of God. It is always a privilege to be able to stand up here, to be able to speak what God's put on my heart. Hopefully it comes through clear to you this morning. So this morning we're going to be reading and looking at the book of Nehemiah. It's in the Old Testament, not usually one of the hot seller books, but it's actually an awesome book. There's so much in the book of Nehemiah. And because I always find it a little helpful when entering a book of the Bible and anywhere in the Bible to find some context. So I'm going to go over just a little bit of context of where we're at in the Bible concerning Nehemiah, and especially in relation to where the Israelites are at, because that's going to come into play later on in the message. So if you're going to read Nehemiah, it's actually best to read Ezra and Nehemiah together. They're actually one book. They got separated later on, so it makes much more sense in the full arc of the story if you read them together. We're not going to read 2 full books this morning. Breathe a sigh of relief. For the sake of time, we're just going to focus on a passage in Nehemiah. So where are we in the timeline with the Israelites? So it's been roughly 565-ish years since King David ruled the united nation of Israel. Since then, the Israelites have been ruled by Solomon's son Rehoboam. The kingdom split into 2, the northern kingdom of Israel and then the southern kingdom of Judah. Both kingdoms were then ruled by a series of good and unfortunately increasingly evil kings in the mix there until about 600 BC. And then the Babylonians came in and destroyed Jerusalem, tore down the temple, and sent many of the Israelites into exile. And that's where we run into Nehemiah. Nehemiah is set about 140 years after the Babylonians have conquered Jerusalem. It tells the story of the return of the Israelites, of the return from exile, and what happens when they rebuild the city and the temple. There are 3 key leaders in Ezra and Nehemiah. Zerubbabel, which is my favorite one. Let's all say that together. Zerubbabel. It flows off the tongue. It's great. Ezra and then Nehemiah are the other 2 key leaders in these books. They all play a role in leading a return of a small group of Israelites back to Jerusalem. And each time they return, they play a part in rebuilding the temple, restoring Israelite culture, and rebuilding the city and the walls. So Nehemiah himself, he is actually a government official. He's working in Persia for the king. He's quite high up. He's the king's cupbearer. And he hears about the state of the walls of Jerusalem. And he's troubled. He prays for permission. He asks for permission to go back to be able to fix some of the walls. And that's kind of where we're going to jump in. So that's a little bit of context for us as we dive in. So we are going to be beginning. I brought my big Bible this morning, and I'm thinking that was a mistake. I have a smaller one, but anyway, I will juggle. So we're going to start in Nehemiah chapter 1 and 2, and for the sake of time, I'm going to paraphrase these 2 chapters, but I encourage you to read these later today. Go back, read through the full chapters, and you're just going to get this amazing story that is really, it's really fun to read. So I'm going to read a couple of verses from each of the chapters just to give us a little bit of where we're at. So starting chapter 1 in Nehemiah, starting at verse 1. So, in the words of Nehemiah, son of Hakaliah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hanani, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. His buddies rolled into town. He wanted to hear about his homeland. Guys, how's it going? Let's go get a drink. Let's go get something to eat. How's Jerusalem doing? And unfortunately, it was not good. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burned down with fire. This was not good news. This was devastating to him. This was his hometown. And I think a lot of us right now, as we are watching the fires burn around us and we see places that we've been to, we see places that we know people that we visited, maybe we have once lived, and we've seen them burned. You can imagine what Nehemiah felt in his heart right now. That feeling of, oh, that's terrible. Knowing the people that are there are suffering, knowing what they're going through. The city was burned. That kind of hit me as I read that. Nehemiah was heartbroken when he heard this. So later, as we go through the chapter, Nehemiah gives an impassioned prayer to God through verses 5 and 11. He confesses the sins of himself, the sins of the nation of Israel, and he asks for God's ear, for God's favor to go before the king and ask the king if he can return, if he can do something about this. And at the end of that chapter, I just want to point out there's an interesting little line right at the end of chapter 1, after he does this impassioned prayer to God. It says, I was cupbearer to the king. Now, this isn't just a random side note. This isn't just a little flex like on the resume, like that he's throwing out there to impress us. This one line actually explains a lot. Cupbearer to the king meant he had access to the king. He was probably the chief financial officer. He held the signet ring, which is the signature of the king. He held the king's ear. So right there in that one line, we know, okay, Nehemiah gets to go before the king because he's cupbearer to the king. And I think that's important to understand his role in leading up to what he asks. So in chapter 2, we read on. I'm going to read the first 2 verses here of Nehemiah chapter 2. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of the king of Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. I was very much afraid. Okay, so here's something really interesting. I actually love that verse. This must be nothing but sadness of the heart. And I think, wow, the king was like really sensitive guy. Like he noticed Nehemiah was sad. Like he was obviously like a pretty nice guy. Like that's really cool. It actually is the total opposite. So it was actually illegal to be sad in the presence of the king. It was basically an insult because for his servants to serve him, the glory of serving the king should have been enough to give enough joy to them that they would always be happy. They should never be sad in front of the king. Serving him is enough. So by showing sadness in front of the king, Nehemiah was actually taking his life in his hands. If the king was in a bad mood, he could have had him killed for that. And actually, I kind of like this. So I'm thinking of now taking this into my life. So the next time my husband complains about doing something for me, I'm just going to go to Nehemiah here and be like, oh, honey, being in the presence of me should bring you enough joy to carry you through. So let's nix the complaining. So there's a little history. Context is good, right? It pays to research into the Bible. It helps you out in your everyday life. So Nehemiah took his life into his hands just by showing the king he was sad. So that next line where he says, and I was afraid, brings a whole new meaning to it because he literally was like, well, this could be it. Thankfully, God was with him and gave him favor. And we read here in verses 3-9 that the king grants him favor. He asks the king, first, can I go to Israel? Second, can I have letters of safe passage that will get me through safely to there? And third, he keeps going. He's like, well, if he's going to kill me, I might as well go for broke here. I'd like some wood to rebuild the temple as well. So he asks for building materials, letters, and permission to return. And the king says yes. He grants all of this to him, which is amazing. It's a miracle of God that he does that. So as we continue on, we think, great, Nehemiah's got his letters, he's good to go, the king's given him permission, his blessing. But Nehemiah is also narrative literature, and no good narrative is complete without your bad guy. And so at the end of this chapter, we see enter the bad guys. So we have Sanballat and Tobiah. Like, they sound like bad guys. They don't sound like guys you'd hang out with. Like, they're grumpy, they're a little bit picky, you don't like them. Sanballat and Tobiah show up, and they are not happy that Nehemiah has been granted permission to return to rebuild. And they are coming at him. So when Nehemiah arrives at Jerusalem, he makes the journey there, he gets there, he actually has to go under the cover of night to inspect the city, to find where's the damage done, what do we need to do. He's sneaking around the city. He's trying to ride his horse, but he can't get through, so he has to get off his horse. Like, it's like Mission Impossible music is playing in the background. It's very exciting stuff. And then we get to the end of chapter 2, and he convinces the Israelites who are still there, who came with him in Jerusalem, guys, we have to rebuild this wall. He gives a speech. There's like movie music. It's amazing. This whole chapter reads like a movie. We have the underdog. He returns to his city. He's going to rebuild. He convinces everyone to come with him. There's the bad guys. They don't want him to do it. They're calling him names and telling him he's a wimp and he has nothing to offer. He stands up to them and he says, we're going to do it anyway. And then chapter 3 comes. And don't read ahead, do not cheat. I want you to guess what comes in chapter 3. That's where I'm going to be preaching from this morning. You think, okay, so far we have the hero, we have the return to the city, he's going to do amazing things. It's either some type of epic battle, maybe a love story. There's always going to be a good love story somewhere in there. You know, he meets a woman he loves. Is it going to be some type of espionage? No, you're wrong on all accounts. Chapter 3 is a list of names. Yeah. Our favorite books of the Bible. Those long list of names that we can hardly pronounce with names of cities that we don't know anymore. That's where I'm preaching from this morning, you guys. Let me hear a yeah. All right, I got one down front. Before you rush for the door, I promise you, this book is amazing. This book actually changed my life about 9 years ago. So that is where I am going to be preaching from today. But I want to give you a little context for me and why this book changed my life and why I'm so excited to preach to you and to talk to you about chapter 3 of Nehemiah today. So about 9 years ago, Gavin and I were in Kelowna. We were at our PAOC pastors conference. I had just had my son Seth. I was a very new mom. And to be honest, I was struggling. I had struggled in my role of becoming a mom. Prior to becoming a mom, I was attending university full-time. I loved it. I loved going to school. I was involved in the arts. I was doing theater. I was performing. I was surrounded by creative people all the time. I was working full-time at a job that was very fast-paced, that was very interactive with customers and people. I was busy. I had things going on. And then I was blessed to have this beautiful baby boy. And my life came to a screeching halt. I was done work. I was on maternity leave. I had graduated university. I no longer had classes. I wasn't doing theater anymore. I was at home alone with this tiny crying thing that I was supposed to now keep alive. And my days became very lonely. Everything that I had identified myself as was gone. And I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what to do with myself. I struggled with my identity, with where I belonged in the world. What was my role now? And I don't know if you've ever had a moment in life where all of a sudden you realize everything has changed. And everything that had secured you as who you were as a person is gone. And you kind of sit there and think, oh, well, who am I now? What does this mean for me? And that was a phase of life that I was in as we sat in Kelowna. I had tears in my eyes, and I don't want you to think I wasn't grateful. I was so grateful. I had a beautiful baby boy. I had maternity leave, which I'm so grateful that we have here in Canada. I was very grateful. I just didn't know who I was anymore and what my role in the world was. I was adrift. I felt purposeless and very alone. Was keeping this tiny human alive now my sole purpose in life? So I found myself sitting there, and I'm surrounded by these pastors and leaders, and they're talking ministry, and they've all got purpose, and they're going for it. And I kind of just felt like I was this imposter, like I shouldn't even be there. I kind of was just sitting alone, hoping no one would even notice that I was there. I felt useless. Nap time and feeding time now ruled my schedule. And the thought of trying to be involved in ministry or do something for God or even do anything other than make sure the baby was fed and the diaper was changed seemed overwhelming to me at that time. And as I sat there alone and really full of despair and full of loneliness, God spoke to me. And the speaker that day, she's a wonderful lady. I now get to call her my friend, which I'm so grateful for. Her name was Pastor Jenny Caldwell. She spoke a message that morning on Nehemiah chapter 3. And this book of lists of names that seems so long and so boring and so like, why are these even in the Bible? It changed my life. So I want to read you this chapter. It is long and it has a lot of long names, but stick with me. I promise you, God will speak this morning. So here we go, Nehemiah chapter 3. It's called, in my Bible, it's titled Builders of the Wall, which is the title of my sermon this morning, Builders of the Wall. Eliashib, the high priest, and his fellow priests went to work and rebuilt the sheep gate. Remember, they're there now. They're rebuilding Jerusalem. They're in it. They dedicated it and set its doors in place, building as far as the Tower of the 100, which they dedicated, and as far as the Tower of Hananel. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zachar, son of Imri, built next to them. The fish gate was rebuilt by the sons of Hassenaah. They laid its beams and put its doors and bolts and bars in place. Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakkoz, repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, the son of Meshezabel, made repairs. And next to him, Zadok, son of Bana, also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. I love that little jab. The lazy guys, they got immortalized for all eternity. So next time you're at a work hard, or you'll go down in history. The Jeshanah gate was repaired by Joiada, son of Paseah, and Meshullam, son of Besadiah. They laid its beams and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. Next to them, repairs were made by men from Gibeon and Mizpah, Melatiah of Gibeon and Jadon of Meronoth, placed under the authority of the governor of the Trans-Euphrates. Uziel, son of Hariah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section, and Hananiah, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to that. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Raphiah, son of Hur, ruled a half-district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section. Adjoining this, Jediah, son of Hiramath, made repairs opposite his house, and Hattush, son of Hashbaniah, made repairs next to him. Malchijah, son of Harim, and Hashab, son of Pahath-Moab, repaired another section and the Tower of the Ovens. Shallum, son of Halohesh, ruler of the district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. The valley gate was repaired by Hanan and the residents of Zanoah. They rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. They also repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the dung gate. I would not want to be on the dung gate because I'm just assuming it's named for its name. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, son of Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Hakkerem. He rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. The fountain gate was repaired by Shallun, son of Kol-Hoseh, ruler of the district of Mizpah. He rebuilt it, roofing it over and putting its doors and bolts and bars in place. He also repaired the wall of the pool of Siloam by the king's garden as far as the steps going down from the city of David. Beyond him, Nehemiah, son of Azbuk, ruler of the half-district of Beth-Zur, made repairs up to a point opposite the tombs of David as far as the artificial pool and the house of the heroes. Next to him, repairs were made by the Levites under Rehum, son of Bani. Beside him, Hashabiah, ruler of the half-district of Keilah, carried out repairs for his district. Next to him, the repairs were made by their fellow Levites under Binnui, son of Henadad, ruler of the other half-district of Keilah. Next to him, Ezer, son of Jeshua, ruler of Mizpah, repaired another section from a point facing the ascent to the armory as far as the angle of the wall. Next to him, Barak, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the entrance of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. Next to him, Meremoth, son of Uriah, son of Hakkoz, repaired another section from the entrance of Eliashib's house to the end of it. The repairs were made next by the priests from the surrounding region. Beyond them, Benjamin and Hashab made repairs in front of their house. And next to them, Azariah, son of Maaseiah, the son of Ananiah, made repairs beside his house. Next to him, Binnui, son of Henadad, repaired another section from Azza. From Palal, son of Uzziah, worked opposite the angle and the tower projecting from the upper palace near the court of the guard. Next to him, Pedaiah, son of Parash, and the temple servants living on the hill of Ophel made repairs up to a point opposite the water gate toward the east and the projecting tower. Next to them, the men of Tekoa repaired another section from the great projecting tower to the wall of Ophel. Above the horse gate, the priest made repairs, each in front of his own house. Next to them, Zadok, son of Immer, made repairs opposite his house. Next to him, Shemaiah, son of Shechaniah. Next to him, Hananiah, son of Shelemiah, and Hanan, the sixth son of Zalaph, repaired another section. Next to them, Meshullam, son of Berechiah, made repairs opposite his living quarters. Next to him, Malchijah, one of the goldsmiths, made repairs as far as the house of the temple servants and the merchants, opposite the inspection gate, and as far as the room above the corner. And between the room above the corner and the sheep gate, and the goldsmiths and the merchants made repairs. Oh, we made it through. We read the whole chapter, and now wake up in case you fell asleep. You're probably thinking, wow, that was a lot of names. That was a lot of places. Why? Why did you just read that to us on Sunday morning? Out of all the books in the Bible, you chose this chapter. Well, Nehemiah had set out to accomplish a formidable task, repairing the walls of a city. He had inspired people to follow him, to come support him. But when it came down to it, when it came down to getting your hands dirty, when it came down to actually building the wall, picking up that brick, slapping on the mortar and putting that brick on and doing it over and over again, he didn't have skilled laborers. He wasn't able to go out and hire a workforce. He had the people who lived in the city. And that's what I want to focus on today. In chapter 3, we see in verse 1, Eliashib, he was a priest. He led people in worship. He spoke the word of God to people. He built the wall. In verse 8, we see, I believe it's Uzziel. He was a goldsmith. He was a jeweler. He worked with fine metals with his hands and detail work. He rebuilt the wall. Hananiah, we see later, he was a perfume maker. I bet he knew nothing about rebuilding walls. His trade was in spices and oils and mixtures, probably family recipes back generations. He picked up bricks and built the wall. In chapter 3, verse 12, we see Shallum. He didn't have sons. He had daughters. Him and his daughters, he had what he had. He had his family. They picked up bricks and they built the wall. And in verse 23, all the way to 29, we see that these people literally repaired the wall that was in front of where they lived. Above the horse gate, the priest made repairs, each in front of his own house. They walked out their door, they looked at their section of the wall, and they went to work. They were ordinary people. They were tradespeople. They were craftsmen. They were priests and teachers. But what set them apart is that they stepped up when they were called. There was a wall in a city that was broken, and they were asked to help rebuild, and they said yes. So as I sat there in that church in Kelowna and I had God's word roll over me, I still remember to this very day the words being spoken. Everybody has their place on the wall. And it was like this little light went off in my head. And I thought, you know what? My role right now might be sitting at home in my little house alone with a screaming baby, but right outside my front door, there is another mom who lives right across who also has a little baby, and I think she's pretty lonely too. And next to her, there's a couple who live there. They don't hang out very often, but the gentleman always comes outside every time I do to say hi. I feel like he's probably feeling pretty lonely right now. And I started thinking about each individual portion of the wall that was right outside my front door, and it changed my life. I started to realize that my section of the wall, my purpose, my role right then as a new mom was where I could walk out my front door. God truly changed how I view my neighborhood through this list of names, that each person stepped up and are named by name because they stepped up in the Bible. Like, how amazing is that they're remembered, that we're talking about them today because they said yes. Like, what a legacy. You see, what I truly believe God used this message was to change my heart. And I hope you come away hearing today that just like the Israelites who were living in a city of broken walls and a city that was just literally broken, how is our city broken today? I bet you if each one of us stopped and thought about our literal neighbor who lives beside us, we probably have a story of brokenness that comes to mind pretty quickly. Or a coworker that you see every day that you work with. I bet you there's stories of brokenness that come to your mind. We're being called to step up and take our place in our wall. My place is not where you are. I don't know where you work or who you see every day. I can't reach them. I can't speak into their life the way you can. You don't know my neighbors the way I know them. But we all have a section of the wall. So I want to challenge you today, whatever profession you are in, whether you work in a construction site, whether you're a stay-at-home mom right now, if you're retired, this is for you. We are being called, and just as Nehemiah rallied the people in verse 17, and he says, "Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem, Chilliwack, lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall." We are the people who are meant to stand in the gap in the walls in our city. Nehemiah wept when he heard of the brokenness of his city. And I know for me, and I've talked about this before, even when I preached last time, where there's so much bad news coming at us every day that it's so easy to put up defenses and to get jaded and to just think, I can't deal with one more bad thing to hear about, so I'm just going to shut down a little bit. And I'm struggling with that myself. But I would challenge you today to maybe, if that's you, open yourself up a little bit again and feel the hurt, to let yourself be a little brokenhearted over what's happening around us in such a broken world. But I don't want us to stay there, and I notice that Nehemiah doesn't either. He doesn't stay weeping. He does. He weeps, he cries out to God, but then what does he do? He gets up, he goes before the king, and he takes action. So great, Nehemiah was able to do that and rally. We don't have a king. I mean, we could try to go for the mayor. I don't know if you get an appointment or not, maybe. I don't know, I've never tried to go before the mayor. But I'm not talking about physical rebuilding, although to be honest, in some of our neighborhoods, maybe that's what it takes. But what does rebuilding look like for me? What does rebuilding my section of the wall actually look like? Oh, I'm so glad you guys asked me that, because I feel like I think I might have an answer. Here we go. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, 27 to 30, it says, "Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you has a part in it." Just like our list of names, every single one of them had a part on the wall. All of you have a part in it because we're the body of Christ. And God has placed in the church, first of all, apostles, second, prophets, third, teachers, then miracles, then gifts of healing, of helping, of guidance, and of different kinds of tongues. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak in tongues? Do all interpret? And the answer is no. We don't all do all, but we all do something. We all have that something. And maybe you don't have the gift of healing or the gift of miracles. Maybe even praying or speaking in tongues isn't your gift, but all of us has something that we have been given in our body of Christ. And then in 1 Corinthians 13, 1 to 3, the news actually just gets better. It gets better and better, because you might be sitting there thinking, Rebekah, I literally have no gifts. I'm a lump on a log. I sit here. I can't talk to people. I'm kind of grumpy all the time. Maybe people don't actually like talking to me. What am I supposed to do? How do I rebuild my wall? I have an answer for you there too. This is amazing. So good. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 1 to 3, it says this: "If I speak in the tongues of men or angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or clanging cymbal. if I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have a faith that can move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and give over my body to hardship that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. So good news, even if you don't have any gifts, even if you feel like, you know what, I have nothing I can give to anybody, if you have love, you're done. Like golden, mic drop, walk out, you're good. That is really all you need is love. But Rebekah, wait, what is love? That's a really broad term. Oh, you guys, I know, I have an answer here too. This is amazing. Thank you for asking. You keep asking me such great questions. In 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, listen up, because this is it. This is the whole thing right here. Love is patient. Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. How do you step up and take your place in the wall today? How do you rebuild? What does that actually look like? How much would change between you and your actual neighbor if you intentionally approach them this week with patience and with kindness? How much would change in your family if you approached with no record of wrongs? If you approached with your interests, their interests before your own? How much would change in your marriage if you were not easily angered? Or with your kids? That one's for me, like honestly, right there. That one hit me hard. If you trusted and hoped and persevered. Guys, I'll be honest with you. This week with my family, I had to persevere. There are times when the people who are closest to us are the hardest to love. Can I get an amen? This was a week of persevere for me. And so I'm not preaching this to you out of a place high up here on the pulpit. I'm probably about as low as you can get with a lot of this right now. But I want this to encourage you today, that if I can step up to the wall and love my family, if I can step up to the wall as a mom who is feeling so low and alone and reach out to my neighbor, you can too. We have a place on the wall. And if you're feeling like I was then, like maybe you don't have a purpose, like maybe everything that you thought you were has been stripped away for some reason, you have a purpose. You are part of the family of God. You are part of our body. The body cannot function without all of its parts. So you're needed. Only you have that place on the wall right outside your door. Nobody else can reach that but you. And isn't that amazing that God has equipped us with gifts of the Spirit to accomplish that? But also love. Like He's literally told us what we can do to help fix the wall, to help build our portion of the wall. So I want to close with a prayer over you. And then Pastor Craig, I believe, is going to come up and dismiss. Father God, we come before you this morning, and we live in a broken city. You know this. You see the brokenness. You see the brokenness that hides behind doors. You see the brokenness that hides behind faces, in hearts. You see the brokenness that's even in this room. Jesus, I pray right now that you would inspire hearts, that if there are people sitting here who feel hopeless, that feel like they don't have a purpose, like how am I supposed to do anything for you, Jesus, that right now you would begin to fill hearts with ideas, with faces and names. Holy Spirit, that you would give boldness and imagination. And most of all, Jesus, that you would start to fill our hearts with love. That if there are hearts like mine that are struggling so hard not to be jaded right now in our world, that you would allow us to feel brokenness, that you would allow us to weep for those around us, to step up and say, yes, I want to do something about that. Thank you, Jesus, that you came, that you died for us, that you did the ultimate act of love, that you came and did the hard part, that all we have to do is say yes. I pray this week that we would see stories, that we would hear of your physical working in people, Jesus. We love you. We thank you that we have hope, that we are not a hopeless people, but that you are here right now. You are with us. And so I pray for our city. I pray for our church. Help us to say yes, to step up and rebuild our city. We love you, Jesus. We ask that you would go with us.